We go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're still admitting people, so we'll just wait a minute.
Yeah, just a few more people coming in.
Okay.
Oh, good morning from Sydney, Australia is right. Thank you.
Hey, good morning. Feel free to put in the chat where you're from. It's always nice to know where people are coming from. Yeah. While you're doing that, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you to this wonderful webinar reunion. The backstory here is that the four of us have worked together in one way or another for really about 20 years. How ironic that we would be launching products back into the market at the exact same time. Judi and Louisa were one of my first original letters trainers, and I believe Nancy was in the audience with me as well at that time, along with letters trainers Carol Tolman and Mary Dahlgren and many others. I had the honor of writing with Louisa, the Language Live, and then writing with Nancy on Language 4th edition, and then more recently entering Sortegories 3rd edition back into the market. So I want to pass the webinar reunion story to Nancy.
Thank you, Sheryl. And I'm going to just pick up on the connection with language, because while we were working on Language 3rd edition, we were asked if we would join forces, because Sheryl had written Sort It and I had written Categories. And Stu Horsfall and Jane Green wanted us to put our products together and do something technological. So we had to first come up with a name, and hence we came up with Sortegories, which at the time was viewed a little skeptically by Stu Horsfall, but we fell in love with it, and so we won. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. How about over to Judi now? How about you?
Well, it's really fun to be here with all of you. And I guess I met Nancy and Sheryl through the language program, the language exclamation mark program many years ago, and then as a letters trainer. And of course, Louisa is one of my literacy heroes, and as a woman, one of my heroes, because she's such a wonderful human being. And I was one of the, you can tell by looking, right? I was one of the original letters trainers, and it's been a great part of my life. So I'm so happy to be here with everybody. And Louisa, what about you?
Hi, everyone. This is really fun for us to get back together in this way. And we're getting back together after several decades of collegial relationships of various kinds, working together on products, working together on letters and Language Live, working together on various things having to do with the International Dyslexia Association, working on various other enterprises. So I can't even remember when all of us first met, but we simultaneously, as it turns out, have all renewed authorship of products and programs and publications that we originally wrote some time ago, and that we got the rights back thanks to changes in the publishing industry. And these changes actually are all good for us, because we've had the opportunity ourselves to rewrite and republish our programs the way we want. And here we go. And we're all launching our products at the same time. So we're glad to join together to give you some idea of what these products are. So I'm going to start first, and I'm going to share my screen and talk to you a bit about spellography.
So while Louisa's sharing her screen, I want to quickly share a breakfast story. And many teachers out there will appreciate this story. I was working with Louisa, and we were meeting in a hotel, and I can't remember why, but we were at a hotel, we went to breakfast, and we were talking, and Louisa very nicely leaned in and said, Sheryl, you need to understand the difference between a letter and a grapheme. You have that mixed up. And I was like eating my waffle at the time, right? And then she went into this explanation about the difference between a letter and a grapheme. And Louisa, you probably don't remember that, but I will remember that for the rest of my life. It was the best breakfast ever and the best professional development a teacher could ever ask for. So I agree with Judi, a literacy hero in so many ways. Thank you for being here with us. And we're so excited to hear more about spellography.
Well, thanks, Sheryl. I forgot that story, but I'm glad to hear it. So spellography has been rewritten. Bruce Rosso and I are the same authors that produced the original work. And let me tell you a little bit about it. I'm very pleased with what we've done with our publisher, Tools for Reading. This is a structured language program, a structured literacy program focused on teaching spelling, but not just spelling in a traditional way. And it's aimed at grades 4 and 5, where there are very few options for teachers to continue or to initiate structured language teaching at the word level for kids. It's aimed at kids who are not very good spellers, not necessarily those who have severe spelling disabilities, because it's probably starts at too high a level for kids who are maybe in the lowest 5 to 10%, but it is really appropriate for kids between about the 10th percentile and say the 50th, 60th percentile on a standardized spelling measure. It is a systematic, explicit, structured language program, and it is teacher-led. It's not something that you just hand to the kids and tell them to go home and study on their own. The teacher explores very actively with the kids how words work and how our spelling system works in English. It's designed for teachers to use with small groups, even though it could be easily adapted for a tutorial situation. The lead characters that produce a fun storyline all throughout spellography are Hari, who is a spelling whiz of about, say, 14 years of age, modeled after the National Spelling Bee winners, and his younger sister, Tara, who has some difficulty spelling, and he's often trying to explain things to her. And they have a dog that provides amusement named Yogi, and they have some other friends who come into the storyline now and then. What we teach in spellography is not just memorization of spelling words. In fact, there's almost no rote memorization of anything in spellography. Instead, what we're trying to do is help kids understand that there are reasons why words are spelled the way they are, and they can become good analyzers of words and good processors, if you will, of all of the aspects of language that are represented in English orthography, and that includes the phonological system, or the phonemes and syllables in speech, the phoneme grapheme correspondences, the syllable spelling patterns that characterize English, morphology, that is most often the prefixes, roots, and suffixes, and other morphological constructions in English, etymology, or the origin of words. We also have exercises on the relationship between word structure and word meaning and usage. And we want to help kids become more aware of the grammatical roles that words play in sentences, so that they can understand the role of derivational suffixes, that is, the suffixes on words that change the part of speech to which those words are added, and that indicate how the word is to be used within a sentence. So let me illustrate what this looks like. I'm going to open up the sample lesson that we have on the Tools for Reading website. And this is Unit 3. Unit 3 has 6 lessons in it. Unit 3 is in Book A, and it's the 3rd lesson of 6 units in Book A. And as you can see from the overview of those 6 lessons, the lessons progress from awareness of what a short vowel is in contrast to the other vowels in English, all the way through morphology and some exercises on syntax and the grammatical role of words in sentences. So this is an integrated approach where we use every lesson and every sequence of lessons in the unit to teach all of the layers of language. And what it looks like is this. Our characters are illustrated throughout. They provide amusement and fun. We start with the most basic idea, which is that short vowels are distinguished from long vowels. We find that even with 4th and 5th graders, they are often unsure of the identity of vowels in spoken words, and that's essential for being able to spell them. So we do exercises like being able to take a word with a short vowel and change the vowel to a long vowel to see what new word they get. These exercises that involve phoneme awareness are to be quick and only take a couple of minutes of the lesson to kind of tune up the ear and focus kids on speech, because spelling is an act of translating speech into print. And if kids aren't able to focus on the details of speech, that's going to erode their ability to focus on the details of print. And then in this unit, we begin instruction in the concept of what a closed syllable is. And the basic principle that characterizes closed syllables in English is that closed syllables have a short vowel in them, but that short vowel is typically protected not only by one consonant that follows that short vowel, but often by several consonant letters or several consonant speech sounds. So in order to illustrate this, we have a story about jealous King Fred, who likes to keep the vowels enclosed to be short vowels, and he employs consonant guards to make sure that the short vowel cannot escape its confinement and it retains its short vowel sound, because if those guards weren't there and the vowel was released, it would turn into a long vowel sound and be able to escape and sing its long vowel. In the next lesson, we focus specifically not just on any consonant blends, but what we've found from research on the errors that kids make in spelling is that they often delete the nasal sound in a final consonant blend. So we use that information from spelling research and spelling error analysis to focus kids on that aspect of this problem of blends that is truly more challenging for them than some of the other aspects of learning to detect and spell consonant blends. So we talk about the nasal sounds, we talk about the role of the nasal letters in representing those consonant sounds. We give a lot of practice writing and manipulating those nasal sounds in blends at the ends of words. The unit goes on to explore short vowels and final consonants as they typically are used in multi-letter graphemes. We do things like closing off words with those consonant combinations, being able to write words to dictation with those consonant combinations, being able to sort and map phonemes to graphemes in words that have short vowels and consonant combinations after those vowels. And then in lesson 4, we're on to a suffixation issue with spelling, which is the doubling rule. When you add a suffix that begins with a vowel, it requires certain kinds of closed syllables to double the final consonant. We teach that and explore it. We also talk about consonant doubling in general as a way of protecting short vowels and making them keep their short vowel sounds and ward off the influence of other vowels in making them long. By lesson 5, we're into morphology. We bring in the base layers of our language, the history of our language, and explaining that the Anglo-Saxon layer is structured somewhat differently from the Latin layer and the Greek layer of language. And we explore over time how each of these historical layers of language is represented in how sounds, syllables, and words are structured. So by the time we get to lesson 6, we are working with sentences and helping kids renew their acquaintance with parts of speech, which we find even in 4th and 5th grade, or especially in 4th and 5th grade, they are supposed to know these concepts, but often do not. They're difficult and abstract. So we start with the basics. And as time goes on, we'll be relating word spelling to parts of speech and to word usage in sentences. And then at the end of every unit, we have a review. And that review is an opportunity for the teacher to check the students' retention of what we've just taught them, and an opportunity to review with additional exercises anything that the students have not grasped sufficiently to enable them to go on with understanding. So overall, let's see here. It's fun. It's interesting. It's unique in that it's not a typical spelling program. We don't have word lists for kids to memorize. We emphasize understanding the structure of language. And to that extent, we know from research that programs that take that approach get better results with kids, and are likely to help kids develop the tools for looking at words and mapping those words in memory so they can be recalled for spelling. Right now, we've published book A, which is good for about 12 to 14 weeks of instruction if there are 3 lessons taught per week. So if you want to know more about spellography, please go to the website toolsforreading.com. And I hope that we'll be seeing more of you all in the future. So now I'm going to stop sharing and go to Nancy.
So Louisa, let me just ask a question in the chat. And the question is, has this been used with middle school readers before?
Well, I'm sure that it has been. We don't often know whether that's the case, and we'd love to know more about it. If any of you know about or have experience using it with middle school kids.
It definitely seems secondary friendly to me. I love the King Fred story. I love that it's not rote memorization. So many times we think of spelling as memorizing, right? And there's so much more to it. I love the grammar and the morphology connections. I think it's great. I can't wait to dig in.
Great, thank you.
Well, let's turn to Sortegories, but before we do, Judi, I made you host because there are still people joining us. So
Okay.
if you can take care of that, I would be grateful. So have you heard about Sortegories? Well, we already told you where the name came from. So what we'd like to do this evening is tell you what it is and why it works, and maybe a little bit more how it works. First of all, the first thing to know is that Sortegories is a web-based practice tool designed to help emergent readers learn to read. And we also envision it being a tool that can be used alongside many other programs that begin with short vowels and move at a gradual pace and follow a similar scope and sequence. As you can see here on the screen, there are 9 squares representing 9 activities. And they are organized in the following way. The first row is focused on decoding and encoding, meaning we're going to be working on the sound to spelling correspondences. The second row brings in the dimension of meaning of the same words that children are learning to read and spell from that first row. And the third row of activities are designed to focus on elements that are important when we put words into context. And that's why we get into morphology, grammar, and building phrases. Very important with Sortegories is that it's based on a scope and sequence of sound to spelling correspondences. And for this reason, it fits kind of nicely between reading single words as practice and decodable text, because now there are many things that you can practice in between those two important skills. So that you can see, this is, by the way, level A scope and sequence. If you want to see this after this session, you can go to our website. It's printable and downloadable and printable. And so that you can see it a little better, I've blown up just the first module. So you can see that we're dealing with one short vowel and 5 consonants. And we like to think about this as a very foundational kind of system where we develop those sound to spelling correspondences. Those become the building blocks for words, and the words become building blocks for phrases. And then looking at it this way, just to reinforce that this progression is what we do basically from sound to text. For those of you who know the language exclamation curriculum, you know that was our mantra, from sound to text. So for example, we're going to do, I can't turn the pages in a book the way Louisa did, so we're going to take you through a few short videos to illustrate different activities. So here we go. The first one is from row 1.
Sat. Change sat to fat. Change fat to cat.
So now that we've worked on building cat in that first row, now our next step will be to go to the semantic row and think about, what does this word mean? And so I'm going to play this activity for you.
Sortegories.
Level A. Categorize it. First, an important question: dogs or cats?
I'm a dog person.
First, select the audio.
I'm going to
For
skip the
example,
directions and just illustrate
now it's
in the
your
interest
turn.
of time.
Put each word in the correct category.
So I'm going to make some mistakes because I want to show you what happens. I'm going to move some, that was not a mistake. Move these words into their various categories. Don't panic if you think something looks wrong, because it is. And we would be having our students read these words. Obviously, we would want to be sure that they're able to do that correctly. And so I'm going to submit my answer.
Good try. Words in blue are in the right category. Try again with the words in red.
So now I've made a couple mistakes, and I would like some help with how to figure that out. So I'm going to use the glossary up here in the corner. Whoops, I have to hit try again first. Hit the glossary.
Select a word to see and hear the definition.
So I know I missed this one, cast.
Cast. A stiff bandage for a broken bone.
So now I can go back, and now that I know that cast, I read it as cats, isn't an animal. I'm going to move it over here to neither. And now I also missed this word, and I got to figure that one out. So
select a word to see and hear the definition.
So this is the word that's in the wrong
Mat.
place.
A small piece of carpet for the floor.
I know mat as a name, so that's a different kind of mat. Here's another mat, and we
A
can
name.
study that difference. Well, now I can go back and make that correction, move that out of there. And now I'm going to submit again.
Great job. All 10 words are correct. Wonderful. You earned a ribbon. Click a pet to feed it. When you are done, click continue.
Now we have this element in because you get a ribbon if it's not 190 or 80% correct. But if you only got 3 of them right, you'd get to feed 3 animals. So there's always a reward, no matter how well or how not well you did. So I'm going to feed the dogs. And then we move on one more.
Here are your results.
We have a printable screen. So if students are doing this on their own, they can print it and teachers can see it or tutors can see it later. And
Thank you. For every 10,000 points scored on Sortegories, we will make a donation to feed rescue animals. The more points you earn, the more we can help together.
so that is the format of all of the activities. So I went through that completely so you could see. Then still in row 2, where we're talking about the meaning of words, we want to show that sometimes the word like cat that we were just talking about, from building it to the semantic meaning, can be one of the distractors. So let's look at this example of analogy building.
Cut is to bandage as break is to oops. Click try again. Cut is to bandage as break is to a cut is covered by a bandage. Correct. Cut is to bandage as break is to cast.
One of the important things is no matter how it goes, students always end up each item seeing some correct response. So we always want students to end with something that is correct. Now, I'm trying to, and then in the last row, we have the example of putting now that word that we've been working on into context. So let's look at this.
Build the fat cat.
And then part 2 of this activity is to not only have built it, but to know what it means.
What question does this phrase answer in the following sentence? The fat cat climbed slowly up the tree.
Now, you may be thinking some of these things students may not already know. And so we're going to now first look at the screen that students see when they log on to Sortegories, and they would choose the module they're going to work on. We were just looking at module 1. And then once they've selected that, they would come in and see the same grid that we're very familiar with now. And we've already looked at categorize it, but if I clicked categorize it, we would be back to starting it just the way I did a few minutes ago. And that is how that works from the student's access point of view. Now, there are several features within Sortegories that we think students may need help with. One of them is a heart word glossary, and we're going to show you that.
Hearts let you know which part of the word is tricky. The heart part needs to be memorized. The rest of the word can be decoded using your knowledge of letters that represent sounds. A yellow heart means you'll learn the way the sound is spelled later. A red heart means you'll need to memorize the sound's spelling by heart. Click Next to view words that have heart sounds in level A.
And so we have a small number across all 6 modules that get used to build our phrases and to also practice some of the same skills from a phonemic point of view. So, and then this is just an example of that page. And then we have another help, which you saw a little bit about with us, the categorize it and
Level A, glossary. Select the activity and module you need from the menu. If you don't see the menu, select this icon to reveal it. Then click the word you want to see, or use the previous and next buttons to move through all the words.
Whoops, I'm sorry, I cut him off.
Level A, glossary.
I'm going to continue. So we have you can see we have the pictured items. And why the reason that we included this in Sortegories 3.0 is that we assume that we have a lot of students who may be able to read these little words, but may not know what they mean. And for them to be able to do those second and third row activities, they have to have some visual or some source of explanation for what the words are. And then the next activity or the next help is when we get into that last row, we have concepts like one and more than one. And so let's see how that works. In this case, we have a question mark. That's our help if I don't know. And I click that. And then we click.
One means singular, which is one person, place, or thing.
And then we can contrast that with.
Adding S to a namer makes it plural, which means more than one.
Now, as this grows up from module 1 to module 3, we have a new concept that we have to deal with. And just to show you that this does grow up, is that we now are going to introduce ownership, which means we're going to be doing possession.
Ownership means belongs to. Adding apostrophe S to a namer makes it possessive, which means it belongs to that namer. The cat's treat is a fish. The cat owns the fish.
Now, these helps are always available to students so they can refer to them as frequently as they need. And then last but not least, in the last row, the questions that are part of phrase building, we're going to hit this and just show you. Going to hit the question mark. And we're illustrating this.
Who did it tells us the person doing the action. The man sat. Who sat? The man.
And one other.
Did what tells us the action the thing or object did. The dog ran. Did what? It ran.
Okay. So those are the helps so that students can get information so they can do the activities. And we want to also point out that if you think about all 9 activities, we really are tackling not only the code part of the rope, but we're also definitely working on the semantic and some of the syntactic aspects as well, getting to that top part of the rope. So if you'd like to see more activities, please visit our YouTube channel. And we're happy to announce that for the holiday coming up, we have a special promotion going on. Giving thanks to those of you who have supported us through this development of 3rd edition and beyond. And we are doing a price reduction for the holidays. So we hope you'll visit our website and take advantage of that. And we thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Whoops, I think I am. And let us.
Oh, you're muted, Louisa.
Yeah. Yeah, Nancy, it's just so great the way you and Sheryl have integrated these layers of language into all of these activities. So it's just so much more than basic decoding. And that's exactly what we've always needed, not to have this artificial separation among the aspects of language that kids need to know. And it's just so beautiful what you've done.
Oh, thank you, Louisa.
Thank you. Judi.
Okay. Well,
You're
I was going to say the same thing, that what's so interesting about spellography and sortegories is that they are dealing with both sides. I'm thinking of the simple view of reading, or you can think about Hollis Scarborough's reading rope, but we're looking at language as a whole and not in isolated silos. And it is really quite amazing because we know that that's what our kids need. We know that when we talk about the science of reading, we're not just talking about phonics and phonemic awareness, but we're talking about all of it. And language is a huge, is the whole contributor, whether it's word recognition and understanding word by word, or understanding the vocabulary, the syntax, and categorizing. We know the brain is a pattern seeker. And I was thinking about that when Louisa was talking about spellography. And then I was thinking about it again when Nancy was talking about, about sortegories. It really, they're both just fantastic and really so right on. And there's somebody wrote a note in the chat while Louisa was talking or after about when who would it be good for? And Louisa had said, if you're in the 10th percentile to the 50th percentile. But the truth is I haven't used it in my own classroom because I was consulting by the time I was using it, but I've used it with schools. And it was good for every speller, because the truth is, even the kids who were the good spellers, mostly in our classrooms, had not gotten instruction in the patterns and structures of our language and the words. So, teachers were amazed that it was helping everybody, except maybe Hari, who was like a spelling bee kid, who maybe didn't need that. But I'm so, it's fun, for me to be listening to you guys. So I just had to speak about that. So, okay, I'll talk
Thanks,
about
Judi.
15
I want to
feet.
add a PS to that. And you said the word fun, and this is just an example, and you're going to add more to the fun, that teaching according to science can be fun. It's not meant to be boring. And I think that's another thing that we all have in common, right? Is that teaching reading according to science can be fun. So I'm really excited about your 50 Nifty activities, and take it away.
Yeah. So in my former life, guys, and believe me, it was a former life, I have a master's in dance. I was a dancer, and, and now I move about much slower. But, and I often think that that's what kind of got me to wanting to do multisensory activities, and really activities that engaged my students when I was teaching. I was a special educator. And, my students needed so many more repetitions than the average kid needed. And I knew that those repetitions could be grueling, and I needed to find a way to make those repetitions engaging for them. So, so that's when I wrote this book. It was really based on activities that I just did in my classroom. But now that I think about teachers as neurosurgeons, right? And teachers being able to change the brain, I really think of it a little differently, because I think about the fact that these activities can help teachers develop the neural pathways, if you think about the fist as a brain, but develop the neural pathways that are necessary for reading. Our brains were wired for speaking, but not reading. And we have the privilege and honor of creating the wiring for reading. It's such a cool thing. It's so empowering to us as teachers. So I think of these activities as not just engaging, but also as, as being the building blocks of neural pathways. So the format of the lessons, and I'm just going to, just do very little with this, but every lesson has an activity overview telling you why you're doing it. I really never wanted to make a cookbook of activities, but I wanted it to be based in the brain and how the brain processes. So I want the teacher to know why they're doing it. Every activity tells you the materials needed. And I have to admit to you that I was not the kind of teacher who went home and spent all weekend making a beautiful laminated game board for my students. So the materials that are needed are ones that you could pull together in 10 minutes. That was my, my measuring stick. Like, could you do this with 10 minutes worth of material, sticky notes, index cards, folders, etc. Very simple activities. The activities are written at at 3 and actually 4 levels, there's a whole class activity for kids who need more repetition. There's a very brief version of an activity that you would do in your small reading group. There's a paired or independent activity for children who need yet another repetition. And then there's also a level of stretching student learning so that you could do this activity. It's not just for struggling readers, but you could do it at a more advanced level. And then there's always a note about setting the purpose and then getting closure on it. And I did that because there's research, if you remember, some of you may, Madeline Hunter's research on when children understand why they're doing something, they actually learn it better. And I put this in because I used to forget to do that when I was teaching. I'd be so busy and I would just forget. So it takes 15 seconds, I've timed it, to read what is the purpose in student-friendly language. And then when you're closing your lesson, you just tell the kids again why they were doing this. And I think that that's an important thing. And when teachers learn to do it just by following the lesson plans, then they'll do it in science and math and everything else. It's something we should be doing, and I often forgot. And then when I wrote this book, I was starting to really understand the importance of speaking and listening. And then I wrote another book on speaking and listening. But there is a talking classroom icon that really helps you remember to integrate language, saying the word in sentences, things like that, throughout your instruction. So we cannot afford to just teach phonemic awareness or phonics or spelling or whatever we're doing in isolation, but the idea of integrating language into it. And that's what's so unique and so engaging about spellography and sortegories too, as well. And this is just a picture of the book and what it looks like. So I tried to make it as friendly, teacher-friendly and simple as I could. And then I'll just show you, a few slides that are related to activities. So this is a phonemic awareness activity where you take a koosh ball and you are developing phonemic sensitivity by throwing the koosh ball. And if you have all the bad boys in your class, you might sit in a circle and roll the ball, more controlled. But, and you're doing word isolation, first sounds, last sounds, whatever the kids are ready for. And ultimately first and last sounds, so that if I said the word was big, and the next person might say the next word is girl. And if they said the word was giraffe, because they know that, that starts with a letter G. We're working on Broca's area in the brain. So we're going to tap it out and go, B-I-G, G. Oh yeah, that starts with the G sound. So, we can't use giraffe, we can use girl, that kind of thing. And then tap it, map it, zap it, which I created for my students using magnetic wands and discs. And I sometimes think that will be on my tombstone, that she created tap it, map it, and zap it. But it's just really, and yes, yes, a magnetic wand is a gimmick, but yes, it is also fun. And that's what we want for our children, to be having fun while they're learning to read. I used to tell the parents of the students that I taught, I know how to teach your child to read. I will teach your child to read. But my goal for myself is to teach them to love to read. And I'll tell you something. Here's a little story. Right now, as we speak, there are painters in my house painting my house. That's why I'm in this office. And one of the painters came in, and when, of course, we had to hire him. He was my good friend Liz's student. He was dyslexic himself. And he told me that he loves to read now. And I said to him, yes, Sheryl, I am so happy, because that was my goal for my students, that not only would I teach them to read, but they would love learning to read so that they could love the process. And then here's an example of how you could stretch the learning. and use tap it, map it, zap it at the multisyllabic level, and then tap it, map it, graph it, where you're actually writing in the letters, and and again doing the same fun activity, but yet now you're using letters. You could do it with a simple word like mop, mop, or you could do it with conversation at an older level. And this is an example, it's just a picture I took at a kindergarten teacher's class of physical phonics, and I'm Magic E, but it's just a fun activity where kids are actually blending the words, holding the words, and changing words. So if you've ever taught first grade, you know that everybody learns the short vowel, and then you introduce the long vowel and they forget the short vowels. So this goes back and forth between long vowel and short vowel. And it was one of the ways I figured out to get kids to know how to do that. And then this would be a small group version of that. So after you've done that big group version, some kids don't need any more repetition, but for others, you could have them, have 2 columns and talk about mat and mate and cap and cape, and they get extra practice with it. And then this would be a version of physical phonics in which you are having children, instead of holding up letters, they're now holding up syllables or morphemes, depending on what you're working on. So again, just another example of what's in the book. And here we have heart words, just like what Nancy was talking about. And we use these for high frequency, spelling. I happen to feel that this is such a powerful activity. If you guys haven't used it yet, I like to have children, I would use heart stickers all the time. I've invested heavily in heart stickers. And I have children, put a heart over the new phonics concept that we're learning. So whether you're learning a vowel team like AI, and it's a decodable word like pale, you would still be doing it. Or if you're learning digraphs and the word is chop, you would have your children put the heart over the digraph that you're practicing with. So it's just fun. And then getting to the other, we're on the other side of the rope with vocabulary and morphemes. And this is branching out where you just take a tree and you put in the middle of the tree, you would put a root or a prefix or a suffix, whatever you're working on. In this case, we have a prefix trans, which means across, and then you're building words that relate to it. And you could do the same thing with the suffix. And here we have ER or OR. Well, and what does that do to a word? And we talk about how it changes a noun, it changes a verb to a noun, and etc. So I just wanted to share some of the activities. This one is school-wide vocabulary, and this little boy is demonstrating effervescent, bubbly. And, if you like to drink a soda or bubbly water, you know what bubbly is. And in school-wide vocabulary, we talk about how beyond the teacher's classroom, if you want children to emphasize something and learn something, celebrate it. And in this case, you celebrate it at assembly, in this assembly, we're going to take just 5 or 10 minutes. And all of the first graders are going to be involved in dressing up and acting out vocabulary words. Rather than having a vocabulary parade once a year, why not do it more often? And then physical grammar. And again, this is so much like what Nancy was talking about. And I love the way Louisa was talking about putting it in how grammar is part of spellography. But what we're doing here, the way this would be done would be with kids holding up words in the front of the room and asking questions. It's good to be able to define what a noun is and a verb is, but it's even more important to know who is the who and the do of the sentence. Where did it happen? What are the jobs of words? So that's part of the program too. Comprehension, I love this, from comprehension from a visual stimuli. What do you see here? What do you think about it? And what do you wonder about it? And then this is just an extension of this, but this is from a book series, a supplemental book series I'm working on, Venturetown Readers, and this is an illustration from it. One of the little boys wants to be an oceanographer. So we take ocean and then we do a knowledge web about it. What are other words that glue on to the word ocean to help you remember and understand and build your knowledge of the ocean? We're all working, I can see that, on knowledge of the world as we're teaching phonemic awareness and phonics. So that I'd love for you to join me for a class. One of the fun things I'm doing now is I'm working with Mary Dahlgren in tools for reading. And she, like she did spellography, she's published 50 Nifty Activities, and I'm teaching classes in it. So if you're interested in this book, and if you're interested, I'd love for you to join me for a class where we go over step-by-step instructions for many of the activities in the book. So I always like to end by saying it's not how much you do, but how much love you put into what you do that counts. And I know that if you're here on this on this webinar with us now at this time in different parts of the world, you care about what you're doing with children and you're putting love into it. So I just really want to thank you for being here with us and sharing your time with us, because I know how precious it is. So thank you so much.
Judi, I just loved listening to you, and a theme through all of us is providing a lot of practice. And sometimes practice gets a bad rep as being boring or drudgery. So one thing is yours is certainly fun. I also think what's important is that practice needs to have kids doing things in novel situations. It's not just doing it in one way, but being able to transfer, and you're really leveraging that through all of your activities. So I just love seeing that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you know, I used the old Sortegories when I was in the classroom and absolutely loved it and found it very engaging. And Louisa, you know, the old Spellography, you know, I'm an old gal, right? The old Spellography was the only spelling program I ever encountered that was completely engaging for kids. And now with the new characters, I can tell that children are just going to fall in love with the characters and want to learn to spell for them.
I hope so.
I think they will. Yeah.
Right. Well, and something you said earlier, I didn't want to interrupt earlier to say that when kids can learn how to spell, nothing's better than success. Nothing is more fun than being successful for them. So I think your program is going to make kids spell better and be successful. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
Louisa, there's a question in the chat. If how much instructional time do you need for each lesson is the first part of the question. And the second one is, when will books B, C, and D be available?
Okay, the last question first. Book B, okay. We're hoping to be going to press in January. And book C and D probably next fall. We have a ways to go there. And how much time? We've designed it to take approximately 30 minutes for a lesson, because 3 times a week. And if that seems like a lot, just think that there's a big payoff for teaching all of these concepts about language for these intermediate students, payoff for reading, payoff for comprehension, payoff for verbal skills in general. So don't think of it as just spelling. Think of it as an education in language that will transfer to a whole lot of other areas.
Great. Another question, are the scope and sequence familiar between these programs? And they're not, but I know why you're asking the question, because without really knowing the revisions of the products, we talked about decoding, we talked about encoding, we talked about grammar, we talked about morphology. So definitely Sortegories is going to be more for the emergent reader, students who are not fluent and need to gain accuracy. Louisa's program is for right now for a little bit older kids, and I would say Judi spans all ages, right? Judi, wouldn't you agree?
Well, I'd say it's K through 6 or 7 anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
All elementary. Anyone else want to add anything to that answer?
Mhm. No.
No, but I think we always said with language that it isn't how old the child is, but what they needed to be working on. So I do think that some older kids could be doing sortegories. And if they still need to be learning the content that we're covering. So I hope that helps.
Mhm.
And if there are any other questions, you can drop them in the chat or unmic yourself and ask those questions. Thank you for your patience in the beginning when we had a little audio
Yeah.
going
sorry
on.
about that.
That's the webinar
Blues.
blues. Right.
And we still have people coming in. We must have time zone issues.
Yes, probably so. Oh, this is, there's a question for, is this a second edition for Judi's book?
And this is really, there are some minor changes, but this is the same edition. We had such a demand for it that we haven't had time to revise it. When Mary started publishing it, we just were able to put it out. So it's a second edition, but it isn't a complete revision. And I plan on doing that in the future.
Well, and I want to say everything old is new again.
Mhm.
The value of your activities, Judi, is timeless. Timeless, good teaching.
Right,
Thank you.
for sure. I love, Judi, that you added the purpose and the closure, because I also forgot that. Like, you get into it and it's so important, but it's a little bit sometimes hard to remember.
Mhm.
There's a question about sortegories, and I failed to mention this. Did I just interrupt you, Sheryl? I'm sorry.
No, you're good. No.
Someone's asking, whenever there's a word in sortegories, whether it's a heading in a sort category or the analogies, all of that is read to the students, or they can hit a speaker icon and hear the word read to them, because we don't expect them to read those words when we're talking about a very small slice of the code. So does that help answer that question for the person who asked?
Hopefully it did. There's another question about did we consider putting pictures on the category chart? For example, a student might be able to read cat, but not be able to read animal. So I think that's what you were asking, right?
That's what I was just trying to answer.
Okay,
Yeah.
so one thing we did put in sortegories is an opportunity for feedback. So if you have suggestions or things like that, you can put that in the feedback in the program. So we do want to hear things like that. But yes, we tried to make it accessible for all learners.
And Louisa, there's a question about whether there will be a primary version of Spellography. Could you speak to that, please?
Yes. I wouldn't advise using Spellography for children below 4th grade because of the kind of humor, the topics, the characters, but we also have the rights back to spelling by pattern. And it's just a matter of how fast Tools for Reading can republish these programs. But I would advise using spelling by pattern once we get it republished for 2nd and 3rd grade. And then for 1st grade, I think with a good code-based program, you almost don't need a separate spelling program. I think reading and spelling tend to diverge more at the beginning of 2nd grade, where there are unique issues around spelling that need to be treated through a spelling focused or speech to print approach.
And we have a question about sortegories and English learners. We heard that sortegories was helpful with language when it was in its earlier version, but we have really gone out of our way to add the glossaries and the hints, the visual hints, and all of the auditory feedback and all of the help with the drop down and illustrating for the very purpose that you're saying, which is that they have a visual support throughout. So I would say, yes, it would be good for English learners for that reason.
And Louisa, I think you addressed this question, but I'm going to ask it again because it's in the chat. Is Bruce still involved in spellography?
Oh, yeah. Bruce, it's a whole lot of credit. He's just preoccupied today with personal issue. But Bruce actually generates the raw material. He's very creative. He really knows. He was my co-teacher for the speech to print text for many years. And this is his way of translating that information for intermediate level kids. He has extensive experience as a teacher and continues teaching kids with these needs. So he and I have been partners in this enterprise for a long time. And I also have a great editorial team that helps shape it up. So yes, we're in it together.
That's awesome. Here's another question I think everybody could take a turn at. How accessible, oops, I just lost it.
No, I
Another
see
question.
it.
How accessible would these resources be for students with special needs, specifically autistic students who have speech delays?
Well,
I think, Sortegories perhaps much more than spellography. However, until we get it out there and people start using it and trying it out, we're not sure. We need to use it, get feedback, and get it into objective experimental research studies in the future.
And I was a special educator when I was doing these activities with my students. So yes, some are more advanced than others, but they're definitely adaptable and would work with many students, and you'd have to kind of figure that out for your, with your own students. So.
And I'd like to make a comment from the Sortegories corner on this, in that when we were working at on the beginning retooling of Sortegories, we were doing it during the pandemic, and we were testing out some of the activities with kids virtually. And one of the things that I think might be really helpful for certain special needs is to have that virtual technology platform for some students, because they relate well there, and you can repeat and you can go slowly, and with all of the supports, at least with Sortegories, that would be possible. So I think it would be highly possible for them. We got some more questions going by there. Sortegories, is it possible to buy a license for more students? Yes. Well, we're working on multiple users, right? Sheryl, you want to speak to that?
Yes, I just put in the chat box for licenses from beyond a single user, just email Sheryl@sortegories.com. What's the other one, Nancy? Customer, I don't want to say it wrong. Customer
support.
Okay, customer
That's
support.
actually the one, that would be the one to use. And then
Yeah, I didn't want to say it wrong.
Yep. So it's customer support.
I'll put it in the chat.
Thanks.
Okay. Somebody had their hand up and now it's not. If you want to unmute yourself or you have a question, we did miss a hand, and maybe you put the question in the chat. Thank you. We're getting feedback that Sortegories would be excellent for students with high functioning autism. I've used Sortegories with all types of students on IEPs. So I've had a lot of success with it over the years. Let's see.
Anything else?
Anything else? You feel free to unmute yourself. I want to thank you all for being here. We will get the recording out to anyone who registered. You can contact any of us for additional questions. And if there's anything else we can help you with, please feel free to stay on. I think we can stop the recording, Nancy.
Yes, I'm going to do that.
Thank you again for being here.
Gotta find the button for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
It was